Welcome into this special edition of Talking Tumors. I am joined by Zach Hughes. Zach, thank you so much for joining us. If you've been watching this show for years, or at least some version of this show, you know that Zach and I are going on a better part of a decade of recording a NCAA tournament March Madness preview. And yes, while this is an Auburn show and Auburn is not in March Madness this year, not in the NCAA tournament, that wasn't going to stop Zach and I. Auburn didn't hold up its end of the bargain. That's not our fault. We're still going to do this show like we always have. So I'm super excited to have you on, Zach, and cannot wait to get into it with you today.
Oh man, this is just one of my favorite things. This kind of for me is the realization that hey, March is here. You check your phone and I got a Zoom invite from Carson. I'm fired up, man. I always love doing this. I know situations a little different in your neck of the woods as far as your mindset usually heading into this tournament, especially over the past few years. Um, but like you said, we love ball. We've loved ball before the SEC has kind of taken this massive jump here in the past few years, and we'll continue to love this conference and love college basketball. So, just looking forward to talking ball with you and diving into everything.
Absolutely. Like I said, couldn't be more grateful for you to join us on here. And again, always appreciate for the listeners to have Zach's knowledge on here. He has a lot more basketball knowledge than I do, so always appreciate it, especially after this year where, I mean, I don't think he's gotten to take wrong on Auburn, and we're going to get into that in just a second, where he's going to share some thoughts on Auburn, because we are going to start with that, talk about what went wrong for Auburn's season. Then we'll move into the NCAA tournament and preview that, talk about some of the SEC teams, Cinderellas, region breakdown, again, of course, finish with our Final Four and championship prediction. But let's start off first with Auburn, as we just mentioned. So Auburn did not make the NCAA tournament this season, the second team out. Auburn had their chances to get into the field. We talked about that on our live stream shortly after the field was announced, but Auburn ended up being the second team left out. So, Zach, the listeners and the viewers have heard my opinion at this point. I don't really need to share too much more. What's your opinion on what went wrong for Auburn this season, and what potentially could the future look like, and how do you get things righted and get this program back where it believes it belongs, and that's competing for championships in the SEC and making runs in March?
I mean, I think you have to go all the way back to how this started, with Bruce's retirement or stepping down right before the season. I think it all starts there. This team, only one key returner coming back from that elite team from last year. A guy who obviously has his hands all over this program. He's been a part of it in numerous roles. He has helped build what this program is. He is a key part of it. But when you switch that chair from sitting in the assistant to associate head coach, defensive coordinator over to you were the face of the program. You're making these decisions and you're doing it in this quick change. I mean, obviously, you can talk about what was being discussed behind closed doors, all that kind of stuff. But even then, you don't know until you're there. You don't know how it's going to be until you're thrown into the fire.
Mm.
And I just think with the roster composition, I even think with Bruce, it would be one of his tougher jobs. Obviously, you can kind of debate on what this team and season will look like if Bruce was the head coach, which I think maybe a few wins more. Maybe you don't lose the Ole Miss or Mississippi State or Oklahoma and you're in the field, but I still don't think it's as drastic as maybe some people would think, because I do think this roster had issues no matter who's calling the shots, calling the plays, recruiting the players. And I just think it was a tall task to ask somebody who is taking on this new role to kind of just figure it out on the go. Because, I mean, a lot of these guys, they kind of get their feet wet at a mid-major. You could say, a lot of fans would probably say, if he went to a UT Chattanooga and kind of got that thing rolling for 2 years and then took over for his dad, what would that look like? Sometimes you got to go and get your feet wet and kind of experience what it's like to make these calls and to have these different dynamics with players when you're not an assistant, you are the head coach.
Yeah, I think you hit on some really good things there. One, again, you hit on a little bit of all of them that I think was just a conglomerate of issues from Bruce's timing of his leaving to the issues with the roster construction to Stephen being a first year head coach. And I agree with you on that. I don't think that it would have been that drastic of a difference with Bruce's head coach. I do think this team probably makes the tournament with Bruce because I do think they get a couple more wins, but I don't think you turn this team all of a sudden into a Sweet 16 team or anything like that. Again, this team was flawed, but and I think you made another solid point really with Steven and this being his first year as a head coach, not having any other experience maybe at a mid major, which had been a complaint of some Auburn fans and wanting would have rather him have had that. Instead, he has to kind of go through those growing pains though as the Auburn head coach. And with that being said, when I did do the live stream after the selection show on Sunday night, when I in my immediate reaction, I didn't think Auburn would take an NIT bid. I kind of doubted just the way this team has played and the lack of energy and effort they played with at times. I kind of doubted that they would be interested in playing in the NIT. However, Auburn did accept a bid. Will host South Alabama on Tuesday night, and if they win that, will continue to host for I think two more games in the NIT if they are able to continue to win. Just real quickly, Zach, what were your thoughts on Auburn deciding to take that NIT bid, which seemingly shocked a lot of folks, maybe even including myself in that?
I mean, I think from a coaching perspective, what him and his staff probably looked at it as is this is a program moving forward move. This is a building the foundation. This is building on to next year for the guys that will be back, depending on how many he wants back, how many will come back on their own accord, that kind of deal. I think there are some pieces on there, and we can get into that, here in a minute or whatever, that you can build around or, have as key pieces next year. I mean, I think it's just, I believe I saw a clip earlier today. He was like, I'm a basketball coach. These are basketball players. That's what we do. And I would have to assume that he talked to his team and there was some sort of vote. There had to be some kind of conversation with his players in some aspect. So I think everybody was kind of on the same page, and it'll be interesting to see pregame tomorrow night or on Tuesday of that opener run NIT game, just kind of what the vibe is and the morale is on the bench and with those players.
Yeah, personally, I have my doubts about the energy and effort that you're going to see from this team just because they've given me no reason to believe that they'll play with high energy and high effort in a game like this. However, I did think that decision from Stephen Pearl's perspective and from the Auburn coaching staff perspective made sense when you're talking about development, especially some of those younger guys on that Auburn basketball team that I think Auburn would like to keep. Now, again, whether they decide to return or not, it's probably still up in the air, but I thought it made sense and I respect Auburn doing it when a lot of teams at in this day and age don't make the NCAA tournament decide to not play in the NIT. So I respect it, even if some Auburn fans are like, I'm tired, I'm done with this team, I don't want to watch another game. I certainly understand that feeling. It's been a frustrating year, but that doesn't mean that the Auburn coaching staff and the Auburn players shouldn't have decided to play another game. I respect them
Mm-hmm.
deciding to do that, but Zach, on that note, let's transition now to the rest of the SEC and the SEC in particular in March Madness. So, SEC got 10 teams into the field this year. I believe it was 11 teams last year, so only one less team. I do think when you look at the league overall this year, there's not as many strong teams as there was last year. Still a lot of tournament teams, obviously, but I don't think you have as elite of teams as you did last season. I think you still have a couple teams that are capable of making a Final Four run, but overall, maybe looking at teams that can maybe just win a game or two here in the NCAA tournament. So I'll let you take it from there, just wherever you want to go with. If you want to pick on a certain team or just talk about the league in general, I'll just open that up to you.
Yeah, this season was very interesting. I mean, you had some teams that kind of went through waves. You can really see it basically all the way down. I mean, Florida, they didn't really have a wave as far as their conference, schedule. They had their wave right at the get go with a few early losses. It kind of just soared through conference play. Teams like Arkansas, Vandy, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, even Kentucky kind of had that up and down waves where they're hot and then they're not, and then they're just kind of stagnant. But as far as this tournament, I kind of separated them into three tiers, kind of just really based off their draw and the potential matchups. Um, and even honestly, man, tier one, some of these, at least two of these four have some rough um, potential. And you got, for me, tier one is Florida, Arkansas, Vandy, and Tennessee. Honestly, I think Tennessee has a decent situation as far as stylistic matchups. Obviously, we can get into that here in a minute, but I see as far as styles, styles make fights, and especially in this tournament. And depending on what they can get from Ament and Jacoby Gillespie, Arkansas, they have one of the more, to me, I think, um, hot or cold situations here. It could go really good or it could go really bad. Florida, they have a tough potential matchup meeting up with Houston in Houston,
Yeah.
especially after last year's game. Tier two, I kind of have Alabama, Mizzou, Kentucky, and Texas. There's always been that kind of 11 seed play in that makes some noise for me. If I had to pick one this year, it would be Texas because they do have some potential and potentially playing a BYU that's missing a key piece could definitely be in their favor. Alabama, obviously with the Aiden Holloway news, that kind of puts them in a little interesting position. But I don't think that really affects them with Hofstra, but I think that kind of changes how I would see the Texas Tech matchup even without Toppin.
Okay.
And then Mizzou, they're playing in St. Louis. That's why I have them in tier two, a pseudo home game as a bubble team. Kind of people kind of had them in Dayton. Kentucky, a lot of people are picking the Santa Clara upset. I'm not really seeing that. I mean, then the two teams that I kind of have in tier three that I really don't give much of a shot to is Buckyball and Georgia. Georgia potentially having to play Michigan, and then A&M. I think St. Mary's is going to give them fits, and if they get past that, they have Houston, and so we'll
Yeah.
see how that goes.
Yeah, I agree with that in my assessment. Now for my tier one, I would include Alabama in that. I do think, of course, if you get matched up with Michigan in the Sweet 16, that would be an extremely tough matchup. You're able to get past Texas Tech. Again, the Aiden Holloway situation certainly complicates things for Alabama potentially losing your second leading scorer. I still think though that group of Florida, Bama, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee probably have your best chances to make the deepest runs from the SEC. But you're right on the 11th seed. Typically, you see one of those teams making a run each year. Texas certainly has that potential. They have a lot of high level scores, and any number of those guys can get hot and can make them really dangerous if they get past that first couple games there. So yeah, I think that was a good breakdown of the SEC, and we'll get more into that as we break down each region here in a second. But before we do that, let's get into Cinderella team. So it's always the most fun part for fans. But Zach, something that I think's been noticed by fans of college basketball, even casual fans that just turn in for the NCAA tournament, like, are Cinderella still possible in this day and age? And there's a lot of analytics now and stats to back up that, hey, it's not as common as it used to be. In large part, we do believe because of the NIL, because of the transfer portal. Some of those Cinderella teams have veteran guys that have stayed around for multiple years. And so, really, they were capable of playing at a higher level. They were still in these mid major schools, and then they get into the NCAA tournament, and they're really high level basketball players. And there's still some of those guys on some of those teams, but maybe not to the same extent. So I'll just pose that question to you. Do you still think Cinderella runs are possible, or at least are they still possible to the same level that we've seen them in the past?
I, I think we will still see some runs from Cinderella teams. I don't think we'll see, the number that we have used to see in tournaments past. I think it'll be a little different than last year where it was real chalky and no Cinderella's really got going. I do think that we will see some this year. I don't know if we will ever really see the Fairleigh Dickinsons and the UMBCs like we have, and watch me say that, and then we end up having one this year. But I still think you'll see a 12 or a 13 win a few games this year. Um, so yeah, I don't think it's done, but I don't think it's to the same extent as we've seen, in the past decade.
Yeah, I agree, and thank you for bringing up that point about it being, it was chalky last year. It really was, and I mean, the other thing that was the first time in my entire life, and I've been filling brackets out as long as I can remember, that I had too many upsets in my bracket last year. So I hope that's not the case this year. I hope it's a few more upsets. I think it makes it a little bit more exciting. Um, and I agree. I think you've got some really good teams along the 12 line, especially would you consider, I'll start with kind of Cinderellas here for me, and then I'll pass it along to you. Do you even consider South Florida Cinderella? I mean, they're an 11 seed. They're playing really good basketball right now. So, I mean, I don't know if you can include them in that group. They're certainly going to be a popular pick to potentially make a run in this tournament as an 11 seed. Like I said, I mentioned a couple 12 and 13 seeds in there. Akron is a popular one. Of course, won the MAC conference championship, came in second in the conference in the regular season behind Miami of Ohio, who's another one. We mentioned though we like Texas to make a little run potentially in this tournament. So those are a couple teams that I've circled. Who am I the most confident in? Probably South Florida. But again, I don't know if I can necessarily call them a Cinderella.
Yeah, I love South Florida. Coach Hodgson, he was on Nate Oates' staff at both Buffalo and Alabama. He was kind of the main recruiter for a lot of those guys that Alabama got. He's got a lot of high major players on his team. Wes Enos is a sharpshooter. He was actually a teammate of Elijah Freeman at D2 Lincoln Memorial. Um, they've got Damian Collins, who was at LSU in Kentucky, Joseph Pinion, who was at Arkansas. So that roster is just riddled with guys who have high major experience. Um, they are the trendy pick. They are the flashiest Cinderella with the got all the makeup on. The slippers are shined, and usually when that's the case, that usually doesn't go well. So as much as I love South Florida and I do have them making a run, a little hesitant just because the one that everybody jumps on usually is the one that gets put out pretty quick. And I really honestly think the matchup with Louisville is a little tough, but I do have them beating Louisville. And then, like you said, Akron, that's kind of a trendy pick with Texas Tech being down their best player. And then Troy, I don't know if you just mentioned them, but obviously being in the state and they've gone up against some high majors this year and been close. They got some cohesion from the tournament team they had last year. A lot of those guys are still here. He built on that team that he had last year instead of going out in the portal and just trying to fix holes. He just really invested in the guys that he had coming back, which is a very unique coaching perspective in today's portal-driven landscape. Um, Worth a look for me, kind of outside of those names. This may be a little bit of a shocker. Is Wright State? I know they're playing Virginia. Virginia's kind of a trendy pick to make a deep run. I like the way they play. They got length. They play kind of a little schemy defense that's kind of out of the. It's kind of a 2-3 matchup with man-to-man principles. And I don't. Virginia. This isn't your same Virginia team that can't score. Coach Odom has kind of revamped that whole offense, but I still think they're susceptible to being upset. I like Penn, old friend McCaffrey, going up against Illinois. Illinois couldn't guard a bag of paper at times. And I don't know if you kept up with the Penn Yale game, but old TJ Power was just tossing them in from the ocean. They can score. So if it gets a shootout, crazy things can happen. I don't necessarily think that is going to be an upset, but definitely one to look at. And then I'd look at VCU. VCU, that 11 seed, like I said, kind of seeing 11 seed make a run. I know they're not in that first four, but they're playing a North Carolina team without their best player. So you never know.
Yeah, VCU is another one. Yeah, that I like the potential of them upsetting North Carolina there in that first round. Of course, you mentioned Penn. as a Auburn podcast. Yes, very familiar with the Ivy League, very familiar with Yale in particular. Painful memories there for this show, but yes, Penn. I can't say that I wasn't happy to see them beat Yale. But yeah, back in the Ivy League schools, definitely got to respect them. And Fran McCaffrey, of course, a very good coach at Penn now. So that's the Cinderellas. Let's move on now to region by region breakdown. So get your pencils out, get ready. Especially don't listen to me, but listen to Zach and what he has to say about his regions. I would go off of him, but we'll start out Zach in the East region, and then we'll kind of make our way through each region from here. Just kind of giving our thoughts on it, who we think could come out of it. Again, we'll do our final four predictions after this segment, but just kind of the East region. Let's start out with that. The teams that are highlighted here, some really big brands, really big coaches in this East region. You've got Duke, you've got St. John's, you've got UConn, Kansas, Michigan State. Of course, that means you've got some really good coaches in Tom Izzo and Bill Self and Dan Hurley, Rick Pitino, and then of course John Shire. So those are some heavyweights. Yeah, I would assume you probably think one of those teams is going to come out of that region. What do you think? How do you see that region shaking up?
Yeah, I know this was the first region that was announced, and I know X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, was really buzzing just off of that fact what you said about the coaches in here. I mean, the potential matchups, a Patino and Self second round matchup, the potential for a UCLA and Mick Cronin with Hurley and a straight up just anger bowl with those two guys. Whoever loses that game's going on a soapbox, and so we will all be dialed in for that. And then you've got that trendy USF in that region. A lot of people are kind of mentioning Northern Iowa. Um, UConn's there, Louisville. So you've got a lot of names, got a lot of coaching prowess. Um, for me, I got, and you kind of just want to go game by game, or you want to go starting with Sweet 16?
Yeah, however you want to do it. You want to start with Sweet 16. That's good.
Yeah, so I said so I have Duke and St. John's in that Sweet 16 matchup in that top portion of that region. And then I know I basically was trying to talk myself out of South Florida, but I have South Florida and UConn in that Sweet 16 matchup at the bottom there, just to try to will myself into a Cinderella run there. Then I have St. John's upsetting Duke, just with Caleb Foster being out. Really don't know about the big guy, what his availability is going to be. If he does play, how much. Is there going to be a minutes restriction? If he does play a lot, is he going to be able to go the next game? There's just a lot of questions there. Then I have UConn beating USF and ending that Cinderella run. Then I have St. John's and UConn. I mean, these two teams have just been slugging it out multiple times this year, three times. So why not? Let's do another. And I have St. John's beating them and representing that region in the Final Four.
Yeah, the East region by far the one I'm most excited about. I know that people get excited about Cinderellas, and yeah, USF could certainly make that run. But yeah, the brands and the coaches in that region, super super exciting. And I agree with you. Duke's injuries just give me pause. I do think at full health they're a really really good team. Of course, number one overall seed, but without Caleb Foster and potentially without their big man as well, yeah, that gives me concern. Add the East region, so I actually have St. John's coming out of there as well. I have them beating Duke in the Sweet 16. I do have Michigan State going against UConn, so a little bit chalky on the bottom half there. And I have Michigan State making it to the Elite Eight, but I've got St. John's coming out of there and getting to the Final Four out of the East region. Moving on to the West region now. Also got some intriguing teams here as well, Zach. Arizona is the top seed over here on this side of the bracket. You've got Wisconsin as one of your higher seeds, Arkansas, BYU's in here, Gonzaga, Purdue. Purdue's one that everyone's high on again because they're one of those teams that just looks like maybe they found their groove. Remember, they were the preseason number one team in the country, lost 5 games at home at Mackey Arena. Crazy. But they go on, seem to find their groove, win the Big Ten tournament. Now they're a little bit of a popular pick. However, Arizona looks like they might just be the best team in college basketball right now. They've looked like it the majority of the year. So Zach, who do you see coming out of that region? Who do you think can maybe make some noise that could be a slightly unexpected? Just what are your overall takeaways from the West region?
Yeah, Arizona is an absolute wagon. The depth that they have, and not just the quality of depth. There's depth, and then there's starter depth, where you could plug these guys in. In our conference, it being SEC guys, Toby Awaka. I mean, he's just elevated what he does. He's still that same brute force, but he's added a little skill components that he didn't have back in Tennessee. Jaden Bradley, another guy that we know from our conference, has just elevated his game. Braden Burries and those guys, and even just all those just the niche shooters that they have coming off the bench. And man, they are a wagon. Great coaching job by Coach Lloyd. This Wisconsin, Arkansas, man, I hope we get this. I hate to be the guy that's like, hey, High Point, Hawaii, just put your managers out there so we can get what we want here.
Yeah.
But I may be saying that because I want to see the Wisconsin style. I want to see Boyd and Acuff. I want to see what I'm looking from Arkansas, and I know it's kind of what we've been saying all year, is what are those bigs going to do in this moment, in this winter go home moment? This isn't, an SEC Tuesday where you can kind of have an off game and get right back on it on Saturday and have a good game between Pringle or Malik Ewan, one of those guys. Those guys have to step up. Brazil has been pretty consistent, especially when he's hitting that tray ball. But when he's not doing that, one of those guys down low have to provide something more than what they've been doing. Acuff's going to Acuff at this point. He's just Acuffing away, and we're all just in his world, and it's brilliant to watch. I like Wisconsin though. I kind of think it may be that game where I'm talking about where Arkansas bigs don't show up and Wisconsin gets that win. So I have Arizona, Wisconsin in that top portion, Sweet 16. I was talking about Texas earlier. I'm going to roll the dice and say Texas, Purdue in the Sweet 16. Purdue, Missouri in that second round matchup could be interesting if Missouri beats Miami. Because Mizzou's been a weird team for me where I'm about to hitch my wagon to them. They lose to somebody they shouldn't have, or they just have this weird performance, and then they go out and they'll beat Florida, or they'll go out and they'll beat Auburn, or they've just been a weird team for me. Right when I'm in or right when I'm out, I sway the other way. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. But then I like Arizona, Purdue. I like Arizona out of the West because they, like I said, man, I'm going to say wagon for the 15th time in this show. They're a wagon.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sweet 16, I've got Arizona against Arkansas in the Sweet 16, although I really do like that Wisconsin team as well. That I really hope we get that matchup, as you were saying, with Wisconsin and Arkansas in the round of 32. But yeah, I've got Arizona into the Elite Eight. I also have Texas in the Sweet 16 against Purdue, but I have Purdue coming out of that. So we have the same matchup there with the 1 versus 2 seed with Arizona and Purdue. But I like Arizona. Again, I just think they're too good. So I've got Arizona coming out of the West into the Final Four. Shifting down now into the South region. This one's an interesting one to me. I mean, again, Florida's in here as the number 1 seed, but you've got Houston as the 2 seed, as you mentioned, playing it in Houston, which is a massive, massive deal for the Cougars. You got Nebraska, you got Vanderbilt, you got Illinois and North Carolina. So I think there's a number of teams that could come out of this region as well. I like Houston to come out of this region. I think Florida faces off against Vanderbilt in the Sweet 16. Then I think you'll get a 3 versus 2 matchup in Illinois versus Houston. But then I've got Houston coming out of it. Now I will say this: I do think the home court will matter a lot for Houston, but essentially home court, playing in Houston. But at the same time, I also am a little bit biased towards Kelvin Sampson. I really want him to get a national championship. So I don't know that this team is good enough to do that, but I do think they are really good. Do think they have the capability of making it to the Final Four. And then my hesitancy with Florida and just still lies in their guards. And I know their guards played really well in the month of March up until the SEC tournament where they struggled again. So I think there's a possibility that these Florida guards stay hot and they are able to win and make it back to the Final Four and have a chance to compete for a national championship. But can you guarantee me that you're going to get a high level performance from those guys for 6 games. In a couple of those games, it may not require their guards to play at a high level. They'll still be able to win. But by the time you get to a Sweet 16, Elite Eight matchup, I think the guards are going to have to play at a high level. I'm just still not confident enough in them. So that's why I like Houston coming out of the South bracket. But how do you view it, Zach?
Man, Carson, I'm going to be honest with you, man. It's going to be hard for you and I to beat that we didn't copy each other's homework allegations. So you got Arizona so far in your Final Four, correct?
Yeah.
You have St. John's,
Yeah.
correct? And you just picked Houston.
That's right.
Well, shocker. I've got Houston come out of this region, but I'll break down how we get there. We'll start with Florida. I got Florida beating Iowa, and then they're matched up against Vandy. Pause. I'm going to talk about Vandy. They got shafted with their draw playing
Right.
McNeese. First off, I think they should be a 4 seed because I know the committee this year tried to make a point of your tournament, conference tournament matters, and the championship matters. They had a nice run, and I think they should have got a 4 over Alabama based off how Alabama finished. Um, and then potentially having to play, Nebraska or Troy, and then potentially having to play Florida again, who you played tough the first time, lost, just took them to the woodshed the second time. Now you're going to have to potentially see them again. So I have Florida and Vanderbilt Sweet 16 with Florida winning. Then I have kind of upset, little Cinderella run, VCU and Houston in that bottom portion, obviously with Houston winning. Then I have Houston beating Florida. Little revenge, but also if we go back to last year, man, those guards were special, and obviously they had the pillar of big guys who were kind of more prominent this year, but were obviously important last year. You had Walter Clayton got them out of a lot of situations, and you don't have that this year. Not that Lee and Fland aren't great, but I do not think either of those guys are going to get you out of a game the way Walter Clayton did, or even Will Richard, and Elijah was great too. So I just their bigs are great, and I think they're going to make that Elite Eight. But there's going to be a game when they need a guard to get them out of a tough situation. I just don't see it this year.
Yeah, you need a tough shot. You knew you could go to Walter Clayton last year. And again, I think back to the Final Four game with Florida and Auburn last year and just the way that he just took that game over in the second half. I mean, he just wasn't missing. And he had multiple games like that, and again was a large part. And it wasn't just him, as you mentioned, with the other guards that they had as well last season. Again, Boogie and Xavier and Lee are not bad players, but they're not to their level. It doesn't mean Florida still can't make a run. They can certainly prove me wrong and that still get back to the Final Four. But I like Houston coming out of that region as well. So that leaves us with the Midwest region being the last one that we've got to go through here. Michigan is the 1 seed in that region. You've got Texas Tech, you've got Alabama and Tennessee out of the SEC, you got Virginia, you got Iowa State. So some good teams got Georgia and St. Louis in the 8-9 game. Um, Zach, who do you like? What do you see in this Midwest region? Who do you like coming out of it?
Yeah, there's some interesting games. This may be a region where I don't see a ton of crazy things happening. Sweet 16, I'm going to have Michigan and Texas Tech. Originally, I may have went with Alabama over a shorthanded Texas Tech team, but now where you have a shorthanded Alabama team against a shorthanded Texas Tech team, give me the more physical and tough-minded team. Probably going to trust Christian Anderson in that game. So Michigan and Texas Tech. And then I like Tennessee and Iowa State in that bottom portion, just because I kind of like Tennessee early against Miami, Ohio, or SMU, and then I like them against a Wright State or a Virginia. And then I got Iowa State coming out of there. I love that team. Uh, they're one of my favorite teams to watch, man. I love their defensive principles. And when they get going on offense, man, they are tough to beat. They've had some great games. And I think Michigan without Case and has shown a little weakness. And so I'm going to be a little different. I'm going to go Iowa State.
I like Iowa State a lot. I like TJ Osselberger, their head coach there. That
Don't tell me you're
region.
about to do it.
No, I'm not.
Okay,
I'm
there we
not.
go.
I want to. I do want to, and I am concerned about Michigan. Um, for me, yeah, LJ Casey was a big loss, and just overall, they've shown some susceptibility, some vulnerability, I guess you could say, down the stretch of the season. But I still think they're a really, really good team, and I still think it's going to take a lot to beat them. I do have them in the Sweet 16. I do have them facing off against Alabama. I made my bracket prior to the Aiden Holloway news. I still think Alabama's got a lot of depth at guard position. That's not to mitigate the loss of Aiden Holloway. I mean, that's a massive loss. He's an incredible shooter, incredible scorer from this Alabama team. I think they can still get over that hump against Texas Tech and get that win and get to the second weekend. But I do Michigan's physicality. I think at that point would be too much for them in the Sweet 16. I do have Virginia and Iowa State. I know you mentioned Wright State potentially as an upset Cinderella earlier in the show over Virginia, but I do have them beating Tennessee in round 32, getting to the Sweet 16 against Iowa State. But this is where we'll differ. I will go with Virginia over Iowa State in the Sweet 16. I'll go Virginia and Michigan. And despite some of Michigan, like I said, some of my concerns about Michigan, I still think they get to the Final Four and come out of the Midwest region. So we did differ in one of our Final Four
There we
teams
go.
as we can recap that real quick. So I'll go ahead and give you mine, and then Zach, I'll let you take it and kind of go through your Final Four and your predictions for that Final Four national championships. And my Final Four, I had Michigan, Arizona, St. John's, and Houston. So St. John's and Houston playing in one game, and Arizona and Michigan in the other. Zach, I'll let you go back over yours.
Yeah, so I got St. John's and Houston, and then Arizona, Iowa State.
Okay. So, since you're the guest, you will get to close out with your predictions. So, I'll go ahead and go first. We'll see if we end up in the same spot here. So, I've got Arizona over Michigan on one side of the bracket. I've got Houston over St. John's in the other side, and I have an Arizona versus Houston matchup yet again. We've already seen it, but we will see it yet again, I believe, in the national championship. And as I said earlier, as much as I want Kelvin Sampson and Houston to win a national championship, I just can't go against Arizona. I know I think they're the most popular pick in the bracket challenge right now. But sometimes the best team's just the best team, and I think Arizona is that, and I think they get the win and win the national championship this year.
I'm gonna go with so obviously I got St. John's and Houston. I'm gonna go with Houston. I just think Kingston Flemings, he's gonna be the difference there. St. John's has some great bigs. They don't have a guard like that. Arizona, Iowa State. I went back and forth on this. I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna go with my heart. I'm gonna go Iowa State.
Let's go.
Um, because you got to look at it. You know, this potential with Arizona and Iowa State. We've seen this, and we've seen these classics. You know, with also with Iowa State and Houston, or Arizona and Houston. We've seen these classics throughout the year. And I'll give me all those games. I'll see it again. You give me a best of seven, I'll watch it. So I got Houston, Iowa State, and I'm just going to keep rolling with it. Give me Iowa State. Let's be different.
Wow.
Let's give me Wizard of Oz. Give me Lipsy, and man, I love their defense.
Mhm.
And when they make shots, which they can do it, they're tough to beat. They put you in a blender. They put your favorite berries, your ice, and they sit there and puree it for 40 minutes, and I love it. And so well, let's roll the dice. Let's go Iowa State.
I like it. So we both go with Big 12 picks. Again, it was most people believe the best conference in college basketball this season, certainly at the top. I think they had the most national championship contenders this year. Just a really strong conference. So, I think you had three Big 12 teams in your Final Four. That certainly would be possible with how good this conference has been. But yeah, Iowa State again like them a lot. So that would be a neat one to see something a little bit different than I think many people are expecting and would not be
And
able
I'll probably be terribly wrong, but that's
Good
the fun
luck.
of this, man.
It's March Madness.
It's fun. It's just a joy to create a bracket and have fun talking with friends about it, and just the banter that it brings. Honestly, it would hurt my pride if I went over on these picks, obviously, but the tournament is fun regardless of your record on your picks. But
Yeah.
man, I just can't wait.
just as an aside here, last year when we did this show and we did the same thing we're doing now. So my final, I had three out of the four teams in the final four. Guess which team I didn't have in the final four? The team this podcast is based on, Auburn. I had Michigan State coming out of there last year instead of Auburn in that side of the bracket. So I felt real smart at that point. So we'll see how it plays out. But I hope everyone followed along. I hope that you're making your own brackets and enjoyed this show again. I can speak for myself, and I'll let Zach speak for himself. But I know that this is one of my favorite things we get to do each and every year. Again, March Madness is the greatest sporting event in all the world, in my opinion. Again, as much as I love college football and other sports, I mean, there's nothing better than March Madness. It is so much fun, and it's so much fun to do this episode. And as Zach was mentioning, just getting to talk basketball with your friends and make brackets and compete, even though you have no control over who may or may not win. But again, it's so much fun. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Again, a little bit something different than what we do year round on Talking Tumors, especially with Auburn not being in it this year. But again, if you somehow skipped over the beginning, we addressed Auburn's situation there at the start. And again, we'll have plenty more to talk about with Auburn in coming episodes that aren't about March Madness. So, Zach, thank you. I'll let you offer any parting words before we wrap up here. But thank you again so much for being on the show and doing this. Again, I can't thank you enough for your basketball knowledge that you bring here. That's so much better than what I can offer. So I'm grateful.
Oh man, I love you. I love your show, man. I love, like you said, nothing beats a sporting event. I love college basketball. It's a big part of my life, and I've invested a lot into being a part of a college basketball program at the NAIA level during my college experience, and just seeing what that meant to me, even at that level. Just the game means so much, no matter if you're at this D1 level, if you're D2 NAIA, if you're playing in the front yard with your buddies. Sports in general can bring people together, and for me, it's basketball as being that prime sport. Also, just a side note, I want to look. I hope there's an NCAA staff member watching this. Do not expand this tournament.
Yep.
We had to pull teeth and create different math equations just to fill this with teams that I still don't even, whatever. I mean, some of these teams don't have any business being in here, so don't expand this thing. It will get expanded but let's just enjoy this while we can. I'll still enjoy it if they decide to expand it, which whatever. But man, just everybody enjoy this whole experience. Me and Carson and some of our buddies, we do a kind of a spin on a traditional bracket. We do kind of like your draft teams from the bracket, and you get points for each time they win. Get creative with it, have fun. Just enjoy this for your friends.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Thank you again, Zach, for joining, and thank you all for watching or listening. I greatly appreciate it. If you haven't already, I'd ask you would just please like and subscribe to the show if you're listening or watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Again, thank you so much, and we'll be back with another edition of Talking Tumors next week. Thank you for listening to Talkin' Tumors. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe and follow @Talkin' Tumors on social media so you'll never miss an episode. War Eagle.